And the session is moderated by plain old me, who you've been hearing since morning, so I'll keep it brief, I promise. We were going to keep this session a little more kosher and very simple, but hearing the last panel has really empowered all of us, so we're going to try and make it a little more controversial. And I've told Deep and
I'll try my
Bhavik,
best.
I have changed their questions, so they don't know what I'm going to ask them, but I'm going to start with a small story. This is back in 2019. I took a couple of funders for a field visit, and we went to the state of Bihar, and we were seeing some education-based organizations in Bihar. We went to a couple of schools, and the funder turns back and asks me, why don't we ask these schools to give us a monthly report? And I look at them saying, why? Because the school is not performing well. And in my head, I said, why the hell do they have to give you a monthly report? But obviously, I couldn't say that. I was relatively new in Dasra, so I couldn't be as controversial as I would have liked to be. And right then, we go to a temple, because that's what you got to do sometimes on funder visits. They make me buy milk for them to serve at the temple, and they put money in the donation box. And I was thinking, are you going to ask them for a monthly report? Why are you doing this, right? And that was how funding and philanthropy was a few years ago. But I'm very grateful to be part of the Rebuild India Fund, where we challenge some of these norms. And Lobo, Ria, Ashish, and Shreya spoke about the ever-present power dynamic. And while, of course, I think we're making strides, we still have a while to go. And I thought it'll be interesting to hear from Bhavik and Deep both about their experiences. And with that, Bhavik, even with MSI, right, there has been quite a shift in grant making. We were in Orange County a week ago, and Bhavik and his team took us through the work they've done. So they've supported large organizations, and they've supported organizations in India and the US, and now you're a partner and supporter of the Rebuild India Fund. So I wanted to understand from you, what has your journey been like in the philanthropy ecosystem? What have been some shifts in grant making?
Great, thank you for the question, and please feel free to have as many candid comments to the funder community. I'm not representing them, but definitely I can speak for MSI. So just to give you a quick background about just where I come from. About 10 years back, I was actually volunteering for one of Dasra's, I think, they were class 2 or class 3 nonprofits, Lend a Hand India. And I was volunteering for them in 2013. Actually, I ran a marathon for them. And so I've kind of been connected with Dasra for a very long time. And today, MSI is one of the primary supporters of Lend a Hand. So we've seen sort of the entire ecosystem of one nonprofit taking that entire trajectory and actually growing to scale. So that is one aspect. But with that sort of preface, I want to highlight that I've been on the nonprofit side. And I've understood, I've traveled, and one of the things that kind of stands out is, as a nonprofit, you're very empathetic. You're always in that activist volunteering phase where you want to make a difference. And that's fine. But what you really lose out on often, not saying all of us do, is brevity. And when you reach out to funders, donors, what you have to really empathize with them is that they really have a short amount of time, and you need to explain your decades of experience in the language they understand the best, right? So so to come back to going full circle, but coming back to your question, how has my journey been? I think I've increased empathy towards funders, which I lacked when I was in the nonprofit side. I realized that, people are intentional, and I can speak for MSI because I'm going to be finishing 4 years in July. So I understand that they come with intention. They want to help, but at the same time, you have to make their job easy as a nonprofit. You need to explain to them the way they would understand. And now you might complain that, how am I supposed to know that? Well, that's your background research. That's your job, right? Of course, one of the primary responsibility of family offices or philanthropic organizations is to make it easy for the nonprofits to get some breadcrumbs. And that's one of my efforts. And that's where I bring my empathy from the field, where I kind of almost handhold nonprofit leaders who are intentional. They have the right mindset, but they probably lack the lexicon that would help them get their foot into the door. And that's probably where I kind of come in to help them. So, probably that's where I would like to leave, and open to hearing your thoughts and questions.
And before I come to Deep, I just want to, sorry, can you hear me? Okay. So before I come to Deep, Bhavik, I just want to ask you a follow-up question. Do you think that you should go towards the nonprofits and understand their language, or they need to rise up and kind of get into the lexicon you were speaking about? Or do you think it goes both ways?
So no one is rising down or drowning in. They're all trying to come somewhere midway, right? I mean, so it's not about. So one of the things is that definitely, almost how much ever trust-based philanthropy talks about putting the sort of the focus on the fundee, but at the end of the day, it's the fundee's job a lot of times to kind of explain their story, and that's one onus that the fundee will inevitably have, no matter what you say. So I think it's sort of like a two-way street, in my opinion. As long as you have your 2 minutes of airtime, if I may, and kind of you are given that platform to explain, it's truly, a 50-50 partnership where you have to come midway and explain, and at the same time, from a donor's point of view, you have to empathize, kind of expand your lexicon, and if, let's say, you understand in terms of numbers and ratios, you probably need to go beyond that and kind of understand what they're trying to say. So it comes both ways, yeah.
Thanks, Bhavik. Thanks for elaborating that. So, Deep, if I were to turn it over to you, and luckily we've together had the opportunity to meet with a number of funders in the last 1.5 weeks. So, I'd like to understand from you, right? So, what have been some of the shifts you've noticed in philanthropy? What have been some of your conversations like in the last 1.5 weeks? And have they been very different from the ones you've had in the past?
Um, I was just telling someone that, in fact, yesterday also we were talking about that, my entire experience for the past 20 days, close to 2 weeks. Prior to this, in India, I have been interacting with lots of donors, funders, HNIs, and most of the 99% of the experience has been very, very bitter. So much so that I had developed this theory that the size of the house or the car is inversely proportional to the size of the heart. Bigger the house, tinier the heart. But out here, for the past 2 weeks that I have been interacting, I have never seen so much warmth, so much love, and so much openness to learn and to treat you as equal, rather than saying, you are my grantee, I can give you I can give you money. So then my theory has now changed that, the size of the house is directly proportional to the size of the heart. And in fact, in many cases, almost 99% of the cases, it has been 2 times the size of the house. So therefore, that's the change that I have seen. Uh, the problem with development sector is also, in fact, the conversation that in the previous group was having about the power dynamic. And we are talking about the vulnerability. Now, power dynamic and vulnerability is very, very closely associated with the cycle of oppression. The oppressed people, and the entire cycle of violence, entire cycle of oppression happens in such a way that the power dynamic keeps on shifting. For example, a man may be working in a very, very dehumanizing condition, but when he goes back home, he will, he will engage in domestic violence against the women in the house, and the mother will then in turn show the same kind of behavior to the child. So this cycle continues, and the child will go outside and do similar kind of socially unacceptable behavior in the society. So it continues, and it continues from the moment. Then if you talk about the donor and power dynamic, continues from the fact that I'm giving you money, you better send me a report. I'm giving you money because I don't like agriculture, but I like children. So can you please focus on children rather than on agriculture? I like climate, not so much on agriculture, not so much on children. So then we try to fine tune, try to adjust our program around that. But what is happening right now over the years, and what I have also seen here, is there's a certain trust, trust in the partnership, that we together, it can't be just my responsibility as a development sector leader, and it can't be just your responsibility as a donor to change the world. We are living in the world together. If there is a climate crisis, if there is pollution here in USA or in Delhi, the schools, the villages out there in Assam will also be washed away in the floods. Children will be staying on the roadside because there is a polluting vehicle running in USA or in Delhi or in Bangalore. So everybody is related. And similarly, if those children are not getting productive economic engagement out there in Assam, then they will migrate to the cities, and where probably they might be engaged in some uh, you know socially not very acceptable activities. So therefore, and then who everybody is paying ultimately. So therefore, it's a relationship. It's a cyclic relationship. So we are all in it together, and that is what forms the trust. And that's how whenever we talk about solution, like just in the previous session, Ria was talking about innovation. So innovation is there will be certain ideas from the development sector. There will be certain ideas from the people who have exposed to the tech sector and the world of innovation out here. Together, we all can create, and believing that the community leaders have the agencies and the skills also to create solution is very, very important. And for the development sector leaders, the fact that the people who have the money also have a heart is also very, very important. Then you come together and sit on a table together and create that beautiful partnership of not 50-50%, but 100% partnership together, because each one has to give 100% into the partnership. So trust-based is what I have seen over the year. It's also giving us the space to co-create a beautiful world together.
Thank you. Thank you, Deep. And you brought up a very important point of community leaders, right? So my follow-up question to you is, do you think the way community leaders, community-based organization leaders are perceived, is it different from the way leaders of mid to large size organizations are perceived? And I want to get your thoughts on how is funding, attention, amplification then different, right? Because you've been leading a community-based organizations and you have a very strong network of people who lead community-based organizations in the Northeast.
Thanks. Very, very important question, because people who are from the grassroots organization leading community actions in in most of the vulnerable communities, vulnerable areas, have lots of emotions, have lot of stories, but they do not have the lexicons and the language that is spoken in the world outside. So whenever we are, like you in the morning, you have heard Deepa. She she is not very comfortable in English, but she's trying to do. She's trying to communicate with you. She's taking that two steps forward to meet with you. So if when we see that the other person are also taking two steps forward to meet you up, I think that's where that's where beautiful relationship develops. And community leaders, especially from smaller organizations, are usually led by people who are experience the most vulnerable aspect of life. You know, uh, they are the one who has probably seen their houses being washed away during the floods. They are the one probably who have been asked to uh, uh, asked to come to the table while staring at a barrel of a gun, you know. Uh, they have been asked to draw up a proposal despite the fact that they have never been to a school. So those are some of the challenges that these smaller organization faces. For them, working in the community is not out of a choice that I want to do something good for the society, I want to do something good for the community. They are there because that's their lived experience. You know, for Deepa, for example, if she doesn't stand up, then she is the one who's going to suffer. Her family is going to suffer. Her community is going to suffer. If I don't stand up for the kind of work that I am doing, if I don't stand up, then ultimately I am the one who's going to pay for it. You know, uh, there may in future there might be some more leaders who might stand up and say we want to do this or we want to do that, but that's not going to impact my life. If I want to impact my life, I will also have to ensure that my surrounding, my community is also impacted. So therefore, trusting community leaders is very, very important. Giving them space, that enabling spaces for co-creating solution is very important.
Thank you, Deep. And that brings me to you, Bhavik. So you've, of course, worked with Lahi. MSI has supported mid to large scale organizations and mostly large organizations, right? So what made you support Rebuild India Fund and leaders like Deep, right? Was it the stories? Was it the lexicon? Or what was it?
For us, we wanted to try it out. But to kind of elaborate on that, I think the funding space is definitely moving towards they're sort of deriving ideas from the VC ecosystem, and people want to expose their capital for a wider audience, right? And I think one of the theses for us to support Rebuild was the kind of portfolio or the kind of reach Dasra has, at least for us, was impressive, especially when we want to spread out to all the states and with a credible name. And for us, of course, there were great references. One of the themes that were pretty much synergetic between what MSI kind of upholds was being catalytic. So one of the things that we kind of really stress on is being catalytic donors or funders. So what that means is, if let's say, and let me give you that example with a case. So in 2015, we started a partnership with Pratham, wherein, of course, everyone in this room probably knows what Pratham does. However, we wanted to see if there's something different we can turn our relationship into. And we wanted them to come up with a model which would provide digital content at an open source level for hundreds and thousands of nonprofits across the world that speak in those languages. And we started that effort with them. And towards the end of 2 years, they came up with 16,000 content pieces in about 14 languages, 10,000 being videos and puzzles, etc. Then the second check they got was from Tide Foundation, from Google. And that was something where, of course, the scale that Google would be able to get them to would be far bigger than a private foundation. But that's how we define, or that's how we use as a use case as catalytic. So I think partnering with Dasra allows us to, again, experiment this, but at scale, because now you're solving the deal flow for us. And of course, me knowing Raj and Sunanda helped, because now I have a reference that, okay, this works. Look, I knew them since 2009. And again, they're not related to me. I just supported them. I ran for them in a marathon. And that's how much I know them. But I see that they kind of scaled over the last decade. So that's how it kind of came together, of course.
Thank you, Bhavik. Appreciate it. I would now like to open it up to the audience. We have some time for questions, so whoever's interested, please ask them questions. Don't ask me any.
There's hardly any controversy going on here, so we can do a better job.
Thank you. It is really fantastic to be in this whole thing and to think about this Rebuild, India Fund. My name is Ranjini Saigal, and Bhavik, of course, we've known you. I'm from Ekal Vidyalaya. So I wanted to ask, I think maybe you, I just want to understand a little bit better. When we are talking about, supporting really capacity building, right? I think that's what I'm hearing from this. What if you want to start something new within the organization and really maybe have to do a pilot, to do a more professional team? Is that something you think there might be opportunities? Because I often feel that we start the pilots with volunteers again, and but at the same time, so that kind of doesn't bring that level of outputs and repeatability and all of that. So I don't know if I'm being a little confusing about this, but I'm just curious from all of you to think if that might be something that we should invest in from your perspectives.
So just to clarify, when you say we, you mean as a nonprofit leader or as a donor?
So would a donor support such a project, say within ACL, I'm just going to, if I want to do something new, but I want to take a real professional team to make the pilot happen, is that something that we can think about? Because usually they say, you've done it before, show us some track, in what we have done. Just like what you did with Pratham, right? I mean, it was a new thing that happened. And the question is, can we actually have a professional team come in and, do that kind of work?
Definitely. So thank you for the question. Of course, I've known you for a while, and it's been a pleasure working with you. So this is a pretty deep question, but I'll try to keep it pretty concise. It's a combination of course, track record or what the vision is, but I think intent sort of supersedes over here. That's because if traditionally an organization has not functioned, let's say, for example, in tech, and now you want to completely overhaul your infrastructure and move towards tech, it's a tough case for someone to buy in, just because historically you've not focused on that. However, if there's a very clear plan and you have a thesis, you've done your theory of change, and essentially are here to really look us in the eye and be like, this is what we want, this is where the world is, and we are ready as a team. We need your support. Of course, a donor is not going to just write a 7-digit check just from day zero, but the best thing you want to know is if they want to support a pilot and see if there is any output. And then, of course, you can double down if the milestones are completed. So if that supports.
Hi, Anjana Patel of Avila Family Foundation, and I have a question for you, Deepa. I'm curious, as a funder, and we've talked about community leaders, power dynamics. From my perspective, I try my best to mitigate that power dynamic. But from your experience, what are some practical things that we can do to really make you feel like an equal partner, from your first conversation until, the work starts? I would love to hear your perspective.
Thanks, Anjana. You were a super host when we visited you. So it's not a rocket science. I think all of us know the language of love. I think that's enough. You spend some time, you give some time, you listen to, you share your vulnerability, you hear others' vulnerability, and you meet without those walls around you. And it's very simple. You just talk to and start loving each other, and a lot of things will be solved if we start loving each other. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, that's very important. It's very simple, but very difficult to follow.
Hi, Bhavik. Hi, Deepjyoti. Thank you so much for your incredible words so far. So I'm Ayushi. I work with Give Directly, and a lot of my work so far has been in the space of evaluation. And we've been talking about lexicon and languages. Lexicon is definitely a word I'm taking away today from the conference. So a part of the language that nonprofits and sort of donors and funders speak is in terms of stories. I've been working with data and numbers. And the fact that results-based financing has been picking up in the ecosystem in the past few years, I just wanted to understand how that language has been working out. For instance, when we look at grassroots organizations, metrics like quality of life or just quality of life in general matters, let's say, over metrics that donors would be looking for in terms of what the reach looks like and what the numbers actually look like. So have you experienced any sort of friction there? And what did the possible solution look like? Thank you.
Do you want to go first? This was tough. I need some time to think.
Thanks for the question. Let me give you a chotu sa example, tiny example. So Northeast for almost 4 decades now has been through a very, very violent period. We have for almost 60 years, we have had a fantastic law called AFSPA, Armed Force Special Power Act, which gives them the sweeping power to shoot anybody that they think are enemy. And that has been there in the Northeast for 60 years. Yeah? So when people come to us and talk about peace and development, we say that we are looking at the barrel of the gun every day. We haven't seen police when we were growing up. We only saw military. So very difficult period we grew up. And suddenly we saw that there was an economic opportunity, things were booming, economic activities were booming. So people started moving from those violent period into the sustainable economic engagement. And suddenly we see that the metrics will say that 10,000 young people engage in economic activity with, let's say, 1,000 rupees a month, salary or income. And everything looks very nice and happy. But many of you may be aware that there is a crisis going on in Manipur. Yeah? Because we did not talk about those wounds, we did not give the time for the wounds to heal. We did not give time to reconciliate. We did not spend time on reconciliation and spending time to talk about the pain that I have gone through, the pain that I have I have caused you. AFSPA is also there for a certain reason. It wasn't like somebody dreamt about it and said tomorrow we should put AFSPA in the northeastern region. So there has been lots of violence and lots of loss that both of the party has had, but nobody wants to sit down and talk about it. And that happens in the family also. I might say something harshful to my wife, or I might say something harshful to my daughter, and she'll, run away inside her room. Later on in the dining table, we will all be like in a stony silence. And the next day, we will all be doing our own activity like nothing has happened. But each of these tiny moments are very, very significant, and they create a huge impact in the psyche of each of us. We try to cover it up with other activities like economic activity, like social activity, go and watch some movie, but we don't talk about those incidents. Let's go to a party, but let's not talk about the hurt that I have caused you. And that doesn't show up in data. That's the challenge. And therefore, we probably need to make the data speak more, make the data talk about the, what's one of the heavy words, intersectionality, of the life. Quality of life may be very, very different. For a young person growing up in Delhi, Delhi is like one of the most polluted city, they will always say that my life is so better than the young person out there in Assam because his school has been washed away in the flood water, so there's no place. I don't have to see the barrel of the gun every day, so my life is so good. But that's not reality. That's not true. some young person out here in the US might say, my life is very good because I've got all the infrastructure, all the facilities here, such a beautiful weather. But is it true? Do you have the relationship? Do you have the trusting relationship? So everybody is somewhere out there, struggling, and those struggles do not come in the numbers. They come in the stories and emotions. That needs to be captured. I'm sure many of you who are in the tech world and play with the numbers will probably somewhere down the line find some solutions how to bring out those emotions in the numbers, and we'll also be benefited from that. Thanks.
So, firstly, it's tough to match up with whatever he said, but 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 I can share from the family office that I work with, and feel free to extrapolate, right? So definitely, data-driven decision making is super essential for us. Being in the Bay Area right now, I'm not going to speak against data, but at the same time, family office, of course, where we work, we care about data. However, if I can use the VC analogy, that you can talk about the story, get in the door, and take that angel check, but if you want follow-on funding, you need to show traction. And you cannot get traction through stories. You have to show why your case fits for scale. And that's really how I would kind of bridge the gap. Of course, and I love that midway where you kind of need to keep the story, alive, because that's kind of attaches you back to your mission and vision and why you're doing what you're doing. And that's kind of a deeper question for all of us, no matter which sector. But yes, coming back, of course, the kind of relevance to data, especially if you want to solve a problem, cannot be replaced or substituted. The way you communicate it is a matter of choice upon the listener, and that's when you have to be a wordsmith as a master fundraiser. That helps.
Hi, my name is Neelu, and I just wanted to follow up this conversation from a perspective of a funder and something that's been hearing a lot in circles, which is as a funder, shift your focus away from outputs to outcomes. Right? And both these things are, we are so used to measuring output, like how many butts and seats, this conference, how many people came to it, how many people sat in it, right? But what is the change that you were looking to make? Right? And those are harder to measure, those are subjectives, but if we focus on the outcome and if you focus on asking organizations, what is the outcome that you want? And then working on that. And that, I think the measurement of it is difficult, but we need to focus on that part. And I think as a funder, shifting away from that would be helpful. So.
No, I think you can answer. Sorry, we can continue the questions. Or you can ask it and we can answer it later.
Answer that, because one of the critiques we get into this dynamic of it's stories versus data, but the question is whose data, right? My friends at BRAC, they said to me something. They said, too often in philanthropy, northern money requires northern data. Right? And so what data is valid for making a decision to pilot something or to scale something? Is it data defined that's useful to the implementer, or is it data defined by someone who's sitting in Silicon Valley working on a whiteboard and trying to figure it out and over-intellectualize it? And so that's what I would add to that.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the questions and perspectives. And sorry, we have to move on to the next session, but there'll be a lunch break shortly, and you'll have time to engage with Bhavik, Deep, and others. And as we conclude this session, we've left it at an interesting note. There's data, there's stories waiting to be told, stories need to be heard, and we'll see where data comes into the mix. And then you have Dasra, and funders ask us all the tough questions, to be quite honest. So we'll continue playing that role, and we just have one short video we'd like to play, and Deep, over to you. Sorry, 2 short videos if we have the time. And Deep, over to you, and then we'll move on to the next session, followed by lunch. Thank you.
It's very short, so please give all your attention. Oi?
97 में जब सितंबर में मास एनजीओ चालू हुआ, तो एक ये मेंबरशिप ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है। तो इसके अंदर अराउंड 3800 अबो देवदासी वुमेन मेंबर हैं, कि देवदासी के लिए जो इतने सब उन्होंने परेशानियां झेली है, जितना इकोनॉमिकली हो, सोशल हो, सेक्सुअली हो, उनको जो भी उनको उन्होंने सहा है, ये नेक्स्ट जो भी उनकी ये है, उनके बच्चे हैं या ग्रैंड चाइल्ड है, ये सिस्टम उन्हीं तक ही रुक जाना चाहिए, ये मेन उनका टारगेट है। और जो उनके चिल्ड्रन या ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन है, तो उनको अच्छा एजुकेशन दे या उनकी लाइफ अच्छे से ये करे, तो उनका एक मेन इंटेंशन है मैम उसका। जैसे मास अभी 97 में चालू होने के बाद इसका जो भी बोर्ड मेंबर्स हैं, तो एक देवदासी वुमेन ही है मैम। इसके अंदर हम ज्यादा पढ़े लिखे या ग्रेजुएट या वगैरह कोई भी उनके अंदर डायरेक्टर टीम में नहीं है। सीओ मैम है सीतवा जोड़ाटी, जैसे आप जानती हैं, वो भी एक एक्स देवदासी वुमेन है। तो हमें एक करेज है कि ये सिस्टम पूरा पूरा रुकना चाहिए हमारे बेलगाम डिस्ट्रिक्ट में, और हमारे बच्चे दूसरों बच्चों की तरह ही इज्जत से जी पाए।
Can you stop? Pause for a minute.
गांव की जो महिलाएं लीडर
Yeah. So the first video that was for about 1.5 minutes. It wasn't very long. It talked about proximate leader. Only the person who's standing in the rain will know the importance of an umbrella, right? So therefore, a leader who has been through that experience, I mean, we call it proximate, nice fancy word, but that's the reality. So that's what we wanted to show. I will talk about all these 3 videos in a while together, but if you can play the second one.
गांव की जो महिलाएं लीडर्स महिलाएं हैं, जैसे अभी हम जिस कम्युनिटी के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, तो वहां से हमारे काम में से भी कुछ लोग आगे निकल के आए हैं। जब हम लोगों ने काम शुरू किया था, तो हम लोगों ने 10 गांव को लेके काम शुरू किया था, लेकिन अभी हम बिड डिस्ट्रिक्ट में 300 विलेजेस में काम कर रहे हैं। लेकिन अभी जब गांव कम्युनिटी तैयार हो जाता है, महिलाएं तैयार हो जाती है, तो वो खुद अपने आप पे काम करने लगते हैं। तो अभी हम इसके वजह से लीडर्स महिलाओं को, कम्युनिटी के कुछ लोगों को ट्रेन करते हैं और वो लोग आगे लेके जाते हैं। हमने जो शुरू किया था ना ताई का, तो एक वॉलेंटियर बेस पे ही शुरू किया था। सिर्फ ट्रेनिंग देना, वो ट्रेनिंग के लिए आने जाने के लिए छोटा सा एक्सपेंस होगा, या ट्रेनिंग के लिए जब वो रहते तो यहाँ रहने का, खाने का बंदोबस्त हम लोग करते थे। लेकिन आगे जाके हम लोगों ने क्या किया, थोड़ा सा अभी हम 2 साल से थोड़ा सा मूड चेंज किया है काम करने का। जैसे हम डायरेक्टली काम करते थे जाके, अभी हम डायरेक्टली नहीं जाएंगे, वो लीडर लोग के थ्रू जाएंगे। तो वो तैयार हो गए ना गांव लेवल। अभी हम लोग क्या कर रहे हैं, हम जो एक लीडर है जो गांव लेवल पे 10 एसएचजी संभाल रहा है, तो 100 महिलाएं अगर 100 रुपए भी करेगी, तो हर साल देती है। जैसे
So in business term, probably it's called the multiplier effect. Yeah. So out here, building the agencies and skills of the community and community leader that we trust you to develop the solutions. Like again, going back to that example of it's the person who's standing in the rain will know what's the best quality model of an umbrella. Umbrella is important, but it should also have the certain aspect of it. So here at Rebuild India, we have been able to engage with these leaders who are themselves creating more leaders in the field. You know, rather than one Deep, Jyoti, Sonu, Brahma with 4 names, I'm the only person I'm going around. I won't be able to change much. But if there are more people out there, more Deep, Jyoti, or more Vishal, or Deval, more people out there in the communities, they themselves will know what is the solutions that will best fit them. So creating that trusting environment, community-centric solutions will come out only then. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we also, as an NGO, we work with government schools and low-income private schools. We've been running pillar to post, leaving no stone unturned to make the government school effective, functional, and delivering quality education. But the challenge is like if you go to the zonal education officer and even if you go to directorate, like nothing happens. The political will of the government is not there at all. When we met children and asked them what they would like to become in future, they are very clueless because, and we asked them why you go to school, and then they said, we go to school because our parents and us and our friends are going to school. So they don't have dream at all. So what we do is like, even when we ask them to sketch randomly what's in their mind, so mostly children draw a gun.
When you ask the children in the Northeast to draw whatever comes to their mind, most of them will draw a gun because that's what they have been seeing all across them. So this also talks about, because at Rebuild India, we are also understanding that when we talk about vulnerability, there are multiple intersectionality, multiple layers of vulnerability. It's not just about poor child. It's also about the violence that he or she is going through. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you. Thank you, Bhavik, for indulging me.